There's a kind of distance that doesn't come from arguments, nor from betrayal. It quietly slips in, like how people begin to touch each other less, ask fewer questions, stop taking the first step, even though they're still together every single day. Have you ever felt that? One morning, just like any other, she woke up a bit earlier. The kitchen was still neat. The coffee was brewed just the way he liked it. The newspaper lay right in its usual spot. She placed the coffee cup on the table. He looked up at her and gave a slight nod. "Thank you," he said, still polite, still proper, but that was all. No warm glance, no small gesture to make her feel like she was still someone he needed. Nobody said anything, but she knew he had changed. Not in any obvious way, but in the quiet, retreating way men often change after turning 60, pulling back, withdrawing, falling into silence. They still fulfilled their responsibilities, still showed care in subtle ways. But as the body slows down, as circulation falters, the feeling of still being a man to be proud of begins to fade. And from there, they stop initiating, stop touching first, stop calling out to one another in the kitchen, stop kissing foreheads after dinner. Others don't notice a thing, but a wife always does. She didn't say anything, didn't blame him, she just quietly observed. And one morning, she chose not to make coffee. Instead, she made a glass of warm water, added to it a quarter teaspoon of baking soda. Something so ordinary, not medicine, not a remedy, just something she'd read about in an article. It said it could help with circulation. She wasn't sure, but she wanted to try. She placed the glass on the table, no explanation, no expectations, but in her heart it was a gentle invitation. "You are still the man I believe in. I don't need you to fix anything. I just want you not to disappear." Can a small glass of water change the growing sense of distance between two people after 60? Can closeness, once thought faded, be awakened again, not with words, but with the gentle patience of a loving wife? It's possible, and sometimes it begins with just one glass of water, quietly, every morning. Mrs. Diane, 68, once said something very true. "He doesn't reject me, but he doesn't touch me anymore either." It sounds simple, but behind those words is a nameless emptiness that many wives after 60 quietly live with every day. There are evenings when he sits right there, just across a small table. Yet she feels strangely far away, not because he has changed, but because he feels like he's no longer someone who can take the lead. They don't say it out loud, but women always feel it. Many times she wanted to ask, "What's wrong?" But she didn't, afraid of hurting his pride, afraid of making him uncomfortable, afraid of touching something he himself couldn't name. After more than 40 years of marriage, the love hasn't gone. But the closeness, the feeling that they still belong to each other, has slowly faded. He no longer hugs her from behind while she does the dishes, no gentle hand brushing hers as they pass in the hallway, no longer holds her gaze for more than a few seconds after dinner. Then one day she couldn't bear the silence anymore, not because she was sad, but because she understood. He was retreating, not because he wanted to, but because he didn't know how to return. She read and researched, not to find a cure for him, but to find a door, a way to invite him back without making him feel like something was wrong with him. And she found an article about baking soda, a simple substance that could support better circulation, especially in older adults. The next morning, she made him a glass of warm water, stirred in a quarter teaspoon of baking soda. No explanation, no expectation. She just placed it on the table and went back to washing dishes. He didn't ask, he simply drank it. But for the first time in months, he turned to look at her, not because of the water, but because of a familiar yet tender feeling. Someone still cared for him, believed in him, not out of duty, but out of love. Closeness sometimes doesn't need to be named. It only needs to be gently invited by a small act, repeated with patience, sincere enough for someone to feel, "I'm still wanted." He didn't say anything, still woke up on time, still made the coffee, still read the paper by the window. But she noticed, lately, he no longer brushed against her back when passing by, no longer casually asked, "What's for dinner?" No longer shared a little story from the newspaper. Everything remained intact, still polite, gentle, kind, but nothing new began. No more initiating a hug after dinner, no light touches while standing together in the kitchen, no lingering glances when she shared a random story. A wife, though silent, is always the first to notice these absences, not because she wants romance like in their youth, but because she misses the man he once was, warm, confident, never hesitant to begin the small things. And when those things vanish, she isn't angry. She doesn't ask, but a quiet realization rises within her. He's withdrawing, not from love, but from the feeling of being a man. Aging brings more than wrinkles or gray hair. It brings a quiet hesitance in men, not because they don't want closeness, but because they fear not being able to respond well, fear letting their wives down, fear feeling not strong enough, not man enough anymore. And from that fear, they step back. No declarations, no confessions, just retreating, subtly enough that no one says anything, but clearly enough that a wife feels it. She knew, and she knew. He couldn't be pushed back by blame, nor coaxed by logic. So she chose a different way, to be present. A glass of warm water every morning, quiet, unexplained. Just a gentle quarter teaspoon of baking soda. Something she read might help blood flow better, move easier, feel warmer from within. Not because she was sure it would work, but because she needed something small enough, steady enough, to remind him, "You don't need to start over. I'm still here, close enough, quiet enough, waiting for you to return." No one would expect a tiny spoonful of baking soda to become a beginning. It has no color, no enticing taste, no special look. But in the world of those who've lived more than half their lives, the small, when timed right, can awaken something big. She read somewhere that baking soda, also called sodium bicarbonate, when taken in the right amount, a quarter teaspoon in a glass of warm water, on an empty stomach, may help balance blood acidity. It sounded abstract, but the more she read, the more she understood. When blood is too acidic, blood vessels constrict, circulation slows, oxygen doesn't reach the places that need it, especially the tiny capillaries where feelings begin. Poor circulation doesn't just make hands and feet cold or walking harder. It also makes emotions feel scattered. Closeness, both physical and emotional, no longer comes naturally. So baking soda, though not a medicine, acts like a gentle signal, helping blood flow more freely, vessels relax more easily, and the body warm itself from within. Not abruptly, not urgently, but quietly, consistently, and just as she had hoped. After 2 weeks, he slept more soundly, woke up clearer. His hands weren't as cold. Sometimes he even gently placed his hand on her back as he passed her in the kitchen, a touch she had longed for, but never dared to ask for. But if you asked her, was it the baking soda that did it? Her answer would be, not entirely. Because the power wasn't in the formula. It was in the person who patiently made that glass every morning. No explanations, no demands, no pressure. Just a wife placing a glass of water on the table each morning like a silent whisper. You are still worthy of love, and I'm still here every morning to remind you of that. Not everyone can talk to their husband about testosterone, nitric oxide, or declining circulation. Not because they don't understand, but because men after 60 don't easily let anyone touch that vulnerability, especially when it's tied to confidence, strength, and the feeling of still being the man in their wife's eyes. But a wife, if quiet enough, patient enough, can guide the way back, not with explanations, not with pressure, but with a very small act, repeated daily, like a gentle heartbeat beside him. Here is the full English US translation, preserving every detail with warm, emotionally resonant language appropriate for a senior audience, 60 plus, intended for voiceover. Chair. Pour a glass of water. Gently stir in a 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda. Set it on the table. No explanations, no pressure, no tracking of results. Just a quiet, steady presence. At first, he might not notice. He might drink it simply because she prepared it. But after 2 weeks, maybe 3, it wasn't his body that changed much, but his mind that softened. Because he knew someone still believed in his ability to come back. Because he felt someone was by his side, not to fix him, but to walk with him. And so he began to return, not with grand gestures, but through the smallest signs. He offered her a piece of fish at dinner. He asked, "Do we still have peppermint tea?" He smiled when she accidentally dropped a spoon. And one quiet Sunday morning, he poured her a glass of water in return, without saying a word. That return didn't begin with a doctor, not with a prescription, but with a familiar hand pouring water each morning wordlessly. That is the role of a wife, not loud, not taking the spotlight, but the one who keeps the home's light from going out. Who helps a man, weary and filled with self-doubt, feel safe enough to step out of the shadows. And it is that patience, though invisible, that quietly restarts everything. Mrs. Marjorie, 70 years old, living in Central California, shared a small story she called the longest silent conversation of my life. I made him a drink every morning, never said why, just told him warm water is good on an empty stomach, 1 glass a day, right on time, never skipped. At first he didn't ask, just drank. Some days he'd quietly rinse the glass and go back to reading the paper like usual. But after 3 weeks, she noticed he began to sleep more soundly. No more tossing and turning at 1 a.m., no more sighs first thing in the morning. Then, one cold winter morning, as they went grocery shopping, she reached for his hand. And for the first time in months, his hand wasn't icy cold. He held hers, not because of the weather, but because he wanted to. That same week, one evening as she sat down on the sofa with a book, he pulled his chair a little closer. Didn't say a word, just sat beside her, quietly, but close enough that she could hear his steady, gentle breathing. She didn't cry, but her heart warmed, not because he seemed healthier, but because he had come back. Not because of medication, not because of advice from someone outside their home, but because of one thing: consistency and respect. She never asked if he liked the drink, and he never asked why she made it. But both of them understood. They were still loving each other in a new, quieter, wiser way. Healing doesn't start with dramatic changes. It starts when someone still believes you're worth caring for, even when you show no signs. And in marriage, the smallest acts, done long enough, can become the loudest declarations. I still choose you every day. No man wants to feel like he's being fixed. Whether at 40 or 70, they still want to be looked at with trust, not examined to see if they're still enough or getting weaker. After 60, changes come slowly but surely. Strength wanes, emotions tuck themselves away. The once effortless acts, like a light hug after dinner, a handhold crossing the street, become things they hesitate over, not because they don't want to, but because they fear doing it wrong, fear their slow responses, fear their wife's disappointment. So they step back, quietly, gently, like someone stepping off a stage, not because they don't love the spotlight, but because they feel unworthy of standing in it. But one thing never changes. Every man wants to be seen for who he used to be. No praise needed, no pushing, just a glance without judgment, a gesture of trust, just someone who still believes, you're still there, and I'm still proud to call you mine. A morning glass of water, a 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda, not medicine, not a treatment plan, but in the eyes of the wife placing it on the table, something stronger than words. I believe in you, not because you have to prove anything, but because I know you are still the man I chose. A man's recovery doesn't begin in the clinic. It begins in feeling heard the right way, seen without being scrutinized, allowed to be himself, even if he's not who he once was. And if anything brings them back, it's gentleness. Gentleness from a wife who doesn't demand, doesn't heal, doesn't push, just stays, patiently, with faith. He may never ask, "What's in this water?" There may never be an immediate hug, no thank you, no special glance. just a glass of water, quietly drunk, and he goes about his day as usual. But the wife continues, every morning, on time, a warm glass of water with a quarter teaspoon of baking soda, never missed, never late. Not because she expects quick results, not because she believes a few glasses can change everything. She does it because she understands. Some journeys need one person to begin, just one. Each time she stirs that glass, she says, without words, "You still matter to me." Even if he shows nothing, even if he's not ready to respond, even if everything stays silent, and it's because it's wordless that it reaches so deep, because there are no expectations, no conditions, no "if you change, I'll do this." Just steady presence, like a quiet breath, like a gentle message in the silence. You don't have to prove anything. I just need you to know you're still chosen. She doesn't heal him because she knows he doesn't need healing. He just needs an open door, a chair still waiting, a glass of water still warm, so that if one day he decides to come back, he won't feel lost. Recovery doesn't always begin with two people holding hands. Sometimes it starts with one person bravely doing something small, long enough, quietly enough, for the other to remember themselves. A wife doesn't fix her husband. She simply invites him home with a glass of water every morning. No one gives awards to the wife who makes warm water every morning. No plaque bears her name. No one stands up at a family gathering to thank her for quietly preserving the warmth of a man slowly slipping into silence. But if you've ever seen a kitchen still lit at 6 a.m., a glass placed just so, at the right angle, the right temperature, you'll understand. A love is still living there, not loud, not demanding, not needing recognition, but patient enough to hold on to a man retreating into quiet. The husband doesn't say thank you. The children don't know what's happening. They just notice. Lately, Dad seems more cheerful, less irritable. Sometimes he even suggests taking Mum for a walk. And the wife, she just smiles gently and continues her quiet task. A glass of water every morning, uninterrupted. That woman isn't just supporting her husband's health. She's holding on to the image of a man whom she's loved long enough, deep enough, not to abandon in the silence of old age. Someone once said, "A woman doesn't keep her husband with beauty, but by quietly holding his hand even when he forgets how to reach out." There are no applause for such wives, but they are the reason a home still has its light. A man still feels like himself, and a relationship still has a chance to return, even after many quiet seasons. You don't need to change him. You don't need to convince him. You don't need to resurrect the man he was at 40. You just need to offer him a chance to remember he's still loved. And that chance sometimes starts with one small act. Stirring a quarter teaspoon of baking soda into a full glass of warm water every morning on an empty stomach. No explanation, no urging, no control, just placing it on the table as if to softly say, "I still believe in you. I'm still here." He may never say a word, may never respond right away, but you'll know, with that unique intuition only a wife has, that you've done the right thing, not because of medical results, but because of soul effects. Because some men only need one gentle invitation to come back to themselves. And if you've read this far, perhaps you too are carrying something quiet, a longing, a sense of something unspoken. Begin with something small, not a big conversation, not a complaint, just one morning glass of water. Have you ever done something small just to help your partner feel loved? If you've ever experienced even a tiny moment of revival, share it in the comments. Your story might be the small light someone else needs on a very quiet morning. And if you'd like to stay close to stories like this, don't forget to follow, not for the algorithm, but to keep your heart just a little warm each day.